So today we will speak about the last segment that can potentially sink the entire real estate market. I would also like to touch on some life events and stories, some conversation that I have in the meantime. The expectation is a big word, expectation and conditioning factors that brought us to this particular, I would say, event and how this will impact the stock market. That's another segment. So let's go one by one. I believe that the stock market today, right, as it stands, right, and more than probably 60% of Canadians are involved in some type of a stock market equity game. It's probably the highest since Canada exists, right, at this point. And we have seen that the stock market is doing well, right, and is giving that return. It is very important. But the big word here is expectation. So, how do we tie this, right? So, we know that since 2022, we went through that dip in the real estate market. And some of us, including myself, we have predicted, right? And I predicted back then that condo market will sink the other real estate segments, right? Like the freehold real estate. And it happened. Why? Because it's tied to one another. People borrow against their properties, buying these properties like condo investments and pre-construction and builds and investments. They call it investments. So all of that, it's tied, and it happened already, right? Now people are holding, right? Because they're taking their money, maybe even borrowed money, right? And they're investing in the stock, and stock is doing incredibly well. Now, I believe that that's the last piece of the puzzle that will completely give another shock to real estate, right? Because everyone has turned, and the expectation is the same as it was in real estate, right? So people would buy these pre-construction condos expecting a 1000% return. There's no ifs and buts, sideways effects. It's just a return. And sometimes even at the presentation centers and realtors and salespeople will say, well, don't worry about it. Trust me, right? In 5 years, you'll make X. Who can predict that? We cannot predict until Monday. Are you kidding me right now? So I think that expectation. So let's touch a little bit further what is happening, right? We see the market, and lately I have myself, and probably you too, we have seen that some properties are selling above asking. And it reaches the headlines, it reaches the mainstream media and all of that stuff, right? So how is this done, right? So most of the time, from the experience, what I have seen so far is that, realtors or sales representatives are speaking to potential clients, and they say, hey, look, we can do X, Y, and Z. And one of them is to lower the actual asking price that is not reasonable in the market. So it's significantly less. So we attract eyeballs. We attract so much. So now what I don't understand personally is how the other side, like the other realtors and potential buyers and real buyers, are actually taking the bait, right? Because it clearly says, hey, look, we're taking offers at a particular time. So they're trying to create that bidding war effect, right? And just because the price is lower than expected, it seems attractive, right, for the time being. So what tends to happen is, I know this for a fact because I have seen the paperwork, but I know that some of the desired outcomes have not been achieved, right? And yet these sellers took that particular lower offer, and yet in the marketing aspect, MLS aspect, like public aspect, that property sold technically over asking. So let me know what you think. Please comment below. I believe it should not be that particular, I would say, propaganda. I mean, if you sold, you sold. That's it. We should not claim because it's technically true, but kind of false, right? So I think those segments, it's either we have all the real estate publicly sold at a starting price like a auction, and then whatever happens happens, and it's pretty simple. It's listed at X, which everybody knows it's not reasonable at today's market and price, and it's sold at that price, and it's fairly simple. So we don't need that gap, sold for 107% or sold 320,000 over asking. Well, you were asking pennies for it to begin with. So that's one aspect. So now, so that creates a lot of buzz. It creates that two lanes. It creates two mindsets. It creates the division, right, of teams. It's create the ones that are saying, wow, you guys are doom and gloom and scared and whatever they're saying, and then it creates the other sides like we are the entrepreneurs and we can make it and we read books and we know it all and whatever. Like even though you were in a hole and you borrowed every single move on your chess and you keep losing, you just don't know it yet. That's the problem, right? So you got caught in that marketing sequence. But let's move on. So I spoke with a gentleman and he's a designer, right? So they have designed for like his story is incredible. He designed for Ferrari, for Apple, for all these big gigantic companies, Siemens or whatever. And you know, speaking to him, I said like, what was your journey in a nutshell? And he said, oh my gosh, I went to school here and there, and he ended up going to school in Italy. I said, what's the biggest problem today? Finding talent, finding the right people in the hierarchy, in the company, and all of that stuff. And he used the word expectation. I said, okay, that's interesting. And, you know, like he brought it back. He's like, I was in the 90s, probably the greatest time of design, like the proper fine-tuning design overall, right? Like the late 90s and the early 2000s, in my opinion, especially when it comes to cars. Now, he said like, look, my expectation was to learn after school, to learn, to grow, and to kind of be with the right people, to learn from the right gurus of that particular industry. And Italy is the mecca of that, right? So he said, now I'm having a hard time because that person across the table is already expecting something that I could probably deliver, but I don't want to. They have no experience. They have nothing. They're shooting empty bullets. They learned it from some AI BS, right? Like a couple of angles, but there are really no true experiences when it comes to something that we can call definition or experience, right? And then they turn around and they go into entrepreneurship. They're growing, opening up their own firms. And he's like, I have no problem with that. But it's like that expectation is so high, even though they're so empty. So I believe the same is happening with real estate. Like that cow gave milk for a long time, right? since the early 2000s, like every single year. Like we were popular in the world, right? If you traveled and if you said, hey, I'm from Canada, right? They would say, oh my gosh, you guys are killing it in real estate, right? Like everybody knew, like that was that machine that gave money, right? So I think it shifted to stock, right? Because liquidation is faster. You can buy faster, sell faster. So it's much a faster gig when it comes to that. But if that segment completely loses it, I think that's it. Like, I don't think that most people are not creating something of value. And then eventually, like, we will come back to zero or that reset where true value will mean true value. It's knowledge, know-how, networking, right? So we will not see the growth, in my opinion. This is just my opinion. We will not see growth of millionaires overnight with no exceptional knowledge. It's like they throw a dice, buy real estate, buy two, buy three, make these millions. They're considered a millionaire. Stock market, same thing, and yada, 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 right? So I think that segment will deflate. And once it does, and Canada is in a hard spot, right? Uh, because we're dealing with tariffs, we're dealing with all kinds of stuff, we're dealing with exodus. A lot of people are leaving. Our dollar, Canadian dollar, sucks. Okay, wherever you go, wherever you travel, if you're taking Canadian dollars, are you kidding me? Like you're broke. You need to bring a bag of money. Okay, so that's another aspect. So a lot of people are trying to cross the border to the United States for whatever reason, better pay, better this, better that. The ratio between prices and earnings is so much better. And there's a whole list of people. I'm sure you know people, or you are yourself in that thinking pattern. So I think the immigration, it kind of stopped, and then the people we're bringing, are they really contributing to the economy? Are we really doing that? Do we have the automotive industry? What do we have, right? So for a long time, we had real estate and we had these cookie cutter homes and condos that we sold to each other at a higher price, right? That's it, right? So I think those are the segments right now that I believe Canada within the next decade, maybe even 2 decades, will have a hard time finding its own DNA, finding its own machine again, right? So we create these businesses and these big hubs so we can kind of grow and make something out of that. So I think definitely in a hard spot. And I just want to touch on something else. And I see it all the time. And the word is expectation, right? I remember growing up in the 80s and 90s and all of that stuff. We had no money. Like, are you kidding me? Like, we had what we had, right? But now I see kids. I'm not jealous. Like, there's no question about that. But I see, like, if you're not driving an ultra luxury vehicle, like you're considered broke. And then once they buy it on credit, they're broke anyways. They just look like they're rich. So I think back then the psychology was different. You imagine in the early 90s, if I showed up with the $100,000 Mercedes, my friends would laugh at me. They would say, oh my gosh, who are you trying to be? Be yourself. Why are you copying? Why are you something that you're not? How much did you pay? Right? Like for that. Like how much money did you have to pay for that? So I think that aspect of expectation moved so much further. And now this generation has been primed or conditioned that they have to have the ultra or nothing, and they're trying to find ways to become rich overnight. And most people know, if they're a real or true business person or entrepreneur, that something like that almost does not exist. So I hope you gained some value out of this video. Please like, share, and subscribe, and I'll see you in the next one.